Okay, more sharing time with patrons. Because again, I assume that patrons are more curious about stuff going on with me than your average subscriber. So, since there's meetup stuff being posted and people are watching that, let's just discuss something. I want to say that the meetups we had this summer were awesome. The one in Vegas obviously was the biggest. The one we had last night was probably our smallest. Didn't help that I changed the start time and Clayton showed up at our usual start time. But uh, I've made friends out of it. And when I said, we were very lucky. The rain stopped a couple hours before we played. And then the rain, holy crap, thunderstorm rain showed up like 15 minutes after we were done. So we get in the van, we start driving, and it's just torrential downpour. You can't see out the window. And it's like, if that had happened while we were on the court, we had a nice little jog to get back to the van. I would have been absolutely drenched to the skin right away. So we were very fortunate. The sun came out, and the court was relatively dry. You're going to see some slips and spills that happened. But we came out of it in pretty good shape. It was a very fortunate summer. There weren't any major injuries. There was one guy banged up his elbow pretty good at one of the meetups we had in Coquitlam, but as far as I know, he's healed up. And, other than the odd welt here and there that somebody gets from blocking those shots, I don't block those shots. As soon as somebody's winding up with a slap shot, I'm like, man, you want it that bad, I'm going to step out of the way, because I'm not doing that. I just know. I've found that once you hit 40, those welts don't heal up right away. They take a lot longer to heal. And then sometimes you end up with scars from cuts that wouldn't have scarred you years ago. It's so much fun getting older. But another thing, too, that I wanted to mention was I'm working on what I'm going to get from Ben H this month, and I'm really kind of excited. One thing that I want to say, Devils fans have been on me a lot lately, and I'm not sure that I understand it. There's been a perception on my channel for months now that I hate the Devils, and I don't. It's really strange. I don't. I did in the 90s. Are you kidding me? That bloody trap when you're watching Rock'em Sock'em hockey all the time and there's hits and everybody's flying around the ice, and then the Devils come into town and it's just like they put a blanket over everybody. There'd be 20 shots for each team during the game. You'd be like, oh my God, there hasn't been a shot in this game in 4 minutes. That was not unusual when the Devils were running the trap. And then the whole league picked up on it. As soon as they won the cup, the league's like, oh, we can just suffocate the skill players. Oh, okay. So skill doesn't have to dictate who wins anymore. This is excellent. Meanwhile, I was mad at Jacques Lemaire because he didn't have to do that. They were a good team. He didn't have to do it. But Jacques Lemaire was very much a man who was just defense, 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 and counterattack. And the Devils bought in, and before you knew it, the whole league was playing that way. So yeah, I hated the Devils for what they did to make the game that way. And I do believe, and still do, that it inflated the stats of Martin Brodeur. Marty was a good goaltender, and he played for a very long time. And I know he's number one on the wins list. He's number one on shutouts. And I've got the video up, my very unpopular opinion on Martin Brodeur, and it still gets comments from people saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. And I obviously never watched him play, kind of things. And it's like, I'm pretty sure I did. And he got out-dueled a lot. There were a lot of nights where I'm like, how the hell is this guy leading the league in wins? Because when he'd get a bunch of shots, he'd let some goals in that he shouldn't have. But, a really good defense can do that. And, it's not a hatred for the Devils. Did I end up hating Brodeur? Yeah. 2007 really did it for me. Was the year that Roberto Luongo was playing absolutely out of his mind, and then Marty Brodeur gets the Vezina because he led the league in wins. And I was like, pretty sure Marty had a good year. Luongo had the best year. Lou played behind a pretty crappy Canucks team. Really crappy Canucks team, and got them to the playoffs that year with almost a record number of wins. And it's, yeah. So yeah, that's when I started really disliking Marty. And I've looked at a lot of statistics, and there are websites which were created and dedicated to this idea that Marty is not the greatest goaltender of all time, which is weird to me. arguing that somebody isn't the greatest of all time at something doesn't mean they're not good at it. Doesn't mean they're not potentially great at it. Just they're not the greatest of all time. And yet, if I say, it seems like to a lot of Devils fans, I'm not saying all, I'm not using absolutes here, I'm not a Sith. The idea that if I say Marty isn't the greatest of all time, that I hate Marty is weird. That's really strange. You know, do you ever see, like, you go into a restaurant, how's your food? It's very good. Is it the greatest you've ever had? No. Then you hate it. We're just going to throw it in the garbage. Great. The chef's going to cry. Does it have to be? It's so weird to me that he has to be respected as the greatest of all time or else you hate him. And there are people who seem to feel that way. He's not the greatest I've ever seen. And the other part that gets me, and we always get caught up in these arguments, especially with goalies, people get really passionate. Gretzky, too, to some extent. Although most people will agree that Gretzky was the greatest of all time. But we talk so much about Roy, Hasek, Brodeur, right? There was generations of goalies before that we didn't see. And they played shorter schedules. They may have played a lot less games. Especially going way, way, way back. So when we're saying this guy's the greatest of all time, you're disrespecting every other goalie that was around from before that generation. That's why I say that, like, Patrick Roy is the greatest I've ever seen. To me, he's the greatest I've ever seen. And I would have Hasek as number 2 and Brodeur as number 3. And Hasek's Hart trophies mean that if you want to argue Hasek belongs at number 1, take it. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Marty never won a Hart. He was never nominated for a Hart that I can remember. His Vezina trophies basically all got thrown at him, and there were years that he won that I didn't think he should have won. That happened more than once. So yeah, what I'm doing, so all of this is coming back to a point. Because there's this perception, and I don't think it helps that the only red current-ish jersey, so the Reebok, the red Devils that I have, is Kovalchuk. I don't think that helps the narrative that I hate the Devils. I think that just plays right into what they're saying. So this month I'm going to get an Adidas Devils, even though I can't stand the striping. But I'm going to get it so that I can get away from that. I don't want to have to use the red and green Devils every time I talk about the Devils. And I don't want to have to use the white one every time I talk about the Devils either. So I'm going to get the red one this month, even though, again, I don't like the striping. I much prefer what they do with the logos on the Adidas than on the Reeboks. They're fantastic. They're amazing. And the shoulder patches aren't just this thin material. Hear that? Yeah. These don't do that. All the shoulder patches... All the shoulder patches on Reeboks do that. And it drives me nuts. Because once I've had jerseys that have the real patches on the shoulders and are really nicely made, even though a fight strap is weird, I have a hard time with some of my Reeboks. So, you know, replacing Reeboks is something that I've been doing for the last few months. And I do need to figure out how I'm going to organize this better. And really, honestly, the best way for us to deal with all this and to make it so that I have enough room and everybody has enough room would be for us to get a bigger house. But that's likely next spring at the earliest, I would think. And it's tricky. Because there are months where I could absolutely afford the rent of a bigger house, and we would prefer it closer to Vancouver. Although, for anybody who is aware of the real estate prices and the crisis, this is a crisis now. Last night they had a debate between not all of them, but there were 8 different mayoral candidates for the city of Vancouver. They had 4 at a time on. And all they asked him about was the housing crisis. That's it. What are you going to do about the housing crisis? And the one guy comes on and goes, well, we would allow people to sublet their homes as 2 units instead of 1. And I'm like, oh my God, really? That's your answer? So now instead of 1 basement suite, now they can split the basement suite in half. Oh, joy. That's what is going to fix the whole housing crisis in Vancouver. And that was basically his answer. This will do it. It won't. He's like, this will add hundreds of thousands. I'm thinking, or tens of thousands, whatever he said. It was ridiculous. So that's why I'm not retaining the information, because it makes me stupider. But it's just, no. There is a housing crisis in Vancouver. Basically that, first off, a lot of Chinese investment coming into Vancouver real estate. So what happens is Chinese buy the house. They may not even see it. They may buy it through a realtor from overseas, and they just own it, and nobody actually lives in it. So the BC government saw how bad this was and basically put penalties on foreign ownership of homes, which is kind of weird, but I get it. And it's helped somewhat, but it hasn't brought any price. No price in Vancouver ever goes down. That's not a thing. And now the BC government that just got in and said, oh, we're all about the people. The first thing they did was take it so that rental increases can be up to 4% now. Next year they can be 4.5%. Which, once you're getting into a $2,400 rent, that's a significant amount of money more per month. And it is much higher than the rate of inflation. So what they do is they drive families out of the city of Vancouver into the valley, which drives up the prices of rentals in the valley where I live. So it is absolutely a cascading effect. And then, then they talk about the homeless crisis. But what Vancouver's plan for the homeless crisis is simple. During the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, they actually bussed homeless people out into the Fraser Valley to get them away from Vancouver. And I think the encouragement of homeless people moving to the valley, I think, is absolutely a Vancouver plan. Like, okay, well, we could just move them. Just move them out there. Because there's a lot of homeless in Abbotsford and Chilliwack now, and that never used to be a problem. But again, when you take your money and you don't put it into low-income housing, which they haven't, and they're not going to because there's no money in it for them, and they'll pay all kinds of lip service. Oh yeah, we're going to put up low-income housing in east side of Vancouver. Oh, tons of it, hundreds, thousands of units. Never happen. And not only do you do that, but you also cut back on mental health costs. So mental health hospitals don't provide services, and people who otherwise would be in a mental health facility just get released onto the street. So they're not capable of supporting themselves. They're not capable of holding a job, of much less maintaining a conversation in some cases. Some of them are just, they should not be out. They shouldn't be on their own. But, previous governments have said, yeah, we'll just cut costs here, and we're not going to put up any housing for anybody, and out you go. Yeah, you're good. You can live on your own. And in the midst of all this, there's me with a small YouTube channel of 61,000 tidy little subscribers, cramped into half of a living room, with basically I've got enough stuff now that I could create a fantastic room. Like this hockey game has been sitting up here for ages now because we have nowhere to put it in the house. So Yvonne bought it for me for Christmas last year, so 2017, and I enjoy it very much. It's a great little game, and there's nowhere in the house to play it. If I had a den, or if we had a house with a basement in it, this rack would be nowhere near me. It would be moved way over. The game would probably be next to me or behind me, and I could move the set around. I could have a completely different look from one moment to the next, or I could have one wall dedicated to one topic, another. Like you could have, I've got all kinds of pictures and all kinds of everything in this room, and I don't have any way of displaying it. I've got all kinds of crap upstairs as well. And then people, of course, will throw their, oh, he's a hoarder. No, hoarding is completely different because I still get rid of stuff. I've been willing to get rid of stuff the whole way along, and I do. Every now and then, I'll just hand a jersey away. There's a couple of jerseys that I'm sending away to one of the people I met in Vegas in the next month or so. I'm going to be sending jerseys that way. It's and again, I don't sell them. I don't solicit that I'm going to get rid of anything. And the trick for me, of course, is that they're in small and medium, and in the case of most men, small and medium may not fit. Not all men are 5 foot nothing like me, and that's just the way it works. But yeah, so I'll be adding New Jersey to this and some other fun stuff. I am going to get one of the thirds the first month, and then hopefully I can get San Jose and Anaheim the next month, because the Ducks one is the one I've really been looking at. As much as I like this jersey, and I do, very, very much. It's a very enjoyable jersey, even though this was a large. For me to get it, I had to buy a large, so I kind of swim in it when I wear it. But as much as I enjoy it, it would be really nice to have a new one in black, because it looks really sharp. But I'll be interested to see how these jerseys look in person. Third jerseys are fun, and yet they're tricky, because most stores, and I've noticed this even with Sport Check now, they'll just stock Canucks, or if you're in Jersey City, they'll stock pretty much one of every team. But when you're looking for alternates, you may not see those at the store level. Those don't always show up at the store level. This year, maybe that'll be different than in previous years. But in my experience, a lot of the alternates that I don't have from years gone by, it's because I can't find them. It's not that I don't want them, I just can't find them. They're not there. So, all right, there you go. And on a related note, I caved, and I've got I've had my eye on that really ugly Washington Capitals Winter Classic from their stadium jersey. You know, the big pajama looking one, Caps. Yeah, that's coming. And it's on its way, because honestly, it's really, really different than anything I have. It is ugly. I am not gonna lie, it is ugly. But it was on sale for half price. I've had my eye on it for a long time, and I'm like, oh, it's half price. Crap, I can't resist. I have to do this. I have to do it. Caps. So I have Caps, Bolts, and Sens. That's just gonna be awesome. That's amazing. And then, you know, I could have myself wearing one, my wife wearing another one, and Gabriel, our middle kid, wearing one. And we could look like something's wrong with us, or we're trying to spell something out. So for people who don't know what our jerseys are, they'll be like Caps, Bolts, Sens, Bolts, Caps. What is that supposed to mean? Do you guys mean something together? So I'm really looking forward to it, very, very much so. I think it's going to be funny, and when I do the unboxing, I really need to have Yvonne in the frame with me for her eye roll, because it will be epic. So there you go. Look forward to that. And again, you guys are amazing. Thank you again for all your support. And these little sort of vlog things are actually kind of fun, so I've started doing them again. There you go. Yeah. And on a personal front, and I don't really talk about any of this stuff anymore, but I just wanted to let people know who've been following me on Patreon for a long time. My son is now living on his own. He's got a good job. It looks like he's on his way to getting a trade and getting his act completely 100% on track. And all of the negative behavior, it sounds like, is either on its way out or it's completely gone. It depends who you ask, but he's doing well. And you know, that's really all that I ever wanted for him, and I'm glad for it. So there you go. Just on a little bit of a personal front. You know, graduated high school. He graduated, and you know, now he's on his own, living on his own. Good. And I think living on your own is honestly the best way to turn things around. I know it was hard for me to sort of leave the nest, to have that self-confidence. And when I got my own place, remember the first night I had my own apartment, and I just sat there and I looked around and I'm like, wow, this place is mine. This is fun. And that was, you know, and of course I had hockey pennants all the way around, and I had 1,200 Christmas lights in that apartment, and they all plugged into the same outlet in the kitchen. So I would just come in and just plug them in the kitchen, and that would be it. It was a nice, lazy way to light the place up. I had 1,200. Yeah, you're not supposed to do that. They don't recommend that. That's a little bit above what they recommend. I didn't care. I was like, well, as long as nothing's on fire and I'll just unplug them when I leave the apartment, that's fine. Not a big deal. So yeah, that was the life back then. Just one light. That's it. No other lights in my apartment got turned on. So I don't know if I paid more on my hydro or less with all those Christmas lights, but they were up year round. And yeah, so there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. I don't have to ask you to like or subscribe because you already have. And yeah, it's 20 minutes. I'll let you guys go. I'll talk to you again soon.